Hey everyone, welcome back to Game Reviews No One Asked For. Today we are going to be talking about the sci-fi roguelike Cryptark. Now, it might be an older game, it came out in 2016, but I think it just might be the best roguelike that you have never heard of. If you like this video, check out my other videos and come check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/Elias the Viking. I stream twice a week from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Fridays, and on Saturdays from 7 p.m. to just about midnight or 1 a.m. So come check me out and let's get into the review. Let's talk about the general overview of what Cryptark is as a game. First, the genre. Roguelike bullet hell. Hard stop. This game does not dilly-dally with any type of subgenres or anything of the sort. It is a dyed-in-the-wool roguelike. No permanent progression, no checkpoints, nothing. Just you and your thumbs. The game takes place in a sci-fi universe where you play a member of a scrapping crew, responsible for salvaging derelict space stations. Each station is occupied by different AI and environmental hazards responsible for defending the ship, aka stopping you. Upon entering the stations, you are presented with the task of destroying the cortex, the central hub of the ship, to complete the salvage and therefore the stage. Each station not only has enemy mobs but also full defense systems. These defense systems kind of act like stage modifiers, but they can be destroyed. A couple of examples of common systems found on different stages are alarm systems, which control lasers all over the ship and if triggered summons a horde of enemies to the location where you triggered it. Shield generator systems, which control a shield that makes another system invulnerable. Usually the invulnerable system is a cortex, which is the main system you are trying to destroy, but it can also be paired with other random systems. And the last example I will give for defense systems is the most annoying system of all, the shuffle system. When you spawn into a stage, you can pull up a map and see where every system is located on the space station, and subsequently plan your route of attack. If a shuffle system is present on that specific ship, those different systems all trade places with another random system on the ship every 60 seconds, making any plans you have go out the window immediately. Pro tip, destroy shuffle systems first. Now that we understand the very basics of the game, we will talk about the different game modes. The game has two primary game modes, Rogue and Campaign. Both have high replayability, but there are some key differences. Let's first talk about Campaign mode. In Campaign mode, your repo crew is contracted to salvage abandoned space stations by some nefarious organization. For each stage of the campaign, 6 total, you are given the option to select one of 4 stations to salvage. Each station is a different type and usually has different defense systems as well as enemy mobs and bonus objectives. Each time you successfully salvage a station by destroying the cortex, you are paid out a predetermined price. For each bonus objective you complete as well, you are given a small cash bonus. After defeating the cortex and completing the salvage, you return to your salvage ship where your health, ammo, and equipment is all replenished before continuing to the next stage. Every campaign you start with $500,000 in the bank, and when you complete levels, the money you earn is added to that balance. That being said, every time you leave your ship to start a mission, the price of your suit is subtracted from your current balance. All suits have a base price for their standard equipment, but if you decide to upgrade your suit, it will cost you more money every time you leave to start a mission depending on what upgrades you added. Upgrades can be found all over different stages and are called scientific research. Once you complete a stage and you return to your ship, the different research that you found on that stage becomes available for you to add to your suit. Be wary of your money though, because if you get blown up during a stage and don't have enough money to be recovered, $100,000, the run is over. The other game mode we have is Rogue mode. Rogue mode is more of a traditional roguelike mode, with each level having progressive difficulty and no breaks between stages. Each level has different weapons spread throughout that can be swapped out for your current weapons, as well as ammo refill modules and health refill modules. The other main difference between these two game modes besides weapons upgrades is that between each stage you do not get to return to your ship, and therefore you do not regain your health and ammo. Now to the good part, combat. The combat for this game revolves around dodging projectiles and properly dispelling groups of enemies before getting overwhelmed. This is unsurprising in a bullet hell style game, but what is surprising is the variability in playstyle depending on which suit you have equipped as well as weapons. Weapons and suits allow the player to engage enemies in different ways, from up-close full chaos to stealthy single-target assassination. Every suit that can be equipped has 4 weapon slots, 4 equipment slots, and 1 mobility ability that cannot be swapped. Each weapon slot can be swapped throughout a run depending on which game mode you are playing. The weapon types include machine guns, shotguns, grenades, cannons, energy weapons, shields, rockets, melee weapons, and projector weapons. Each of these weapons types have different uses and playstyles dependent on how you want to play. Equipment can also be switched out, but is usually one-time use and pertains to either health or survivability. It should be noted that every suit can equip every weapon type, but they each start with a different loadout with various weapon types. There are 7 playable suits in the game, each one with a unique loadout. The first suit is the Gunhead suit. Gunhead's playstyle is well-rounded and easy to play, with a little bit of everything. Gunhead's default weapons loadout is as follows. A medium machine gun, which starts with 1500 rounds, is easy to control and does moderate damage. A standard shield that blocks damage in 180 degrees in front of the suit. A ram spike used for close combat and great for charging through and destroying low health enemies, and high explosive grenades with 20 rounds that detonate after a certain amount of time and are good for doing a large amount of damage. Gunhead's default equipment is just 2 Fix 5 hull repair kits. Gunhead's hull strength is 10, and lastly, Gunhead's mobility ability is a pretty standard dash. Next we have the Rook suit. Rook is a heavy suit with low maneuverability and high survivability. Rook plays like a tank with slow movement, moderate damage, and really excels at clearing large swarms of enemies. Rook's default weapons loadout is as follows. A zapper shotgun with 50 rounds which fires slowly but sticks to enemies and does damage over time. A medium burst machine gun with 750 rounds, good for engaging enemies at further distance, doing moderate damage. A tractor beam which grabs enemies and allows Rook to throw them in a selected direction, doing a large amount of damage to the enemy grabbed and any enemies in its path. And sticky grenades with 20 rounds that are just like explosive grenades, but they stick to their targets. Rook's default equipment is a Fix 10 hull repair kit and an EMP that stuns all enemies in an area. Rook's hull strength is 12, and lastly, Rook's mobility ability is not mobility at all, but rather a bubble shield that blocks all damage when charged and really makes the suit super tanky. Up next, there is the Jeanette suit. Jeanette, quite simply put, is a saboteur or bomber suit, and is the only suit that has just 2 weapon slots, because it carries 4 remotely detonated nukes that can destroy multiple systems at once if placed properly. Jeanette's default weapons loadout is as follows. A heavy burst machine gun with 1,000 rounds that does good damage and good for picking off enemies from a distance. A low velocity mortar with 20 rounds that does high damage and explodes on impact. And the aforementioned 4 remotely detonated nukes. Jeanette's default equipment is 2 Fix 5 hull repair kits and 2 drones that can be deployed to pull aggro and do minor damage to enemies. Jeanette's hull strength is 11. Last of all, Jeanette's mobility ability is also not mobility, but rather a pulse that redirects all enemies and projectiles. Now we have the Salamander suit. Salamander is a brawler type character coming in with close range weapons that do great AoE damage and have the ability to shred through many enemies at once, but is not great at single target damage. Salamander's default weapons loadout is as follows. A flamethrower with 1500 rounds that spreads out at close range and does AoE damage. A standard shield that blocks damage in 180 degrees in front of the suit. A gauntlet melee weapon that swings in an arc in front of Salamander, doing high damage. And mines, which spread out around Salamander in clusters of 3 and are triggered when enemies are in proximity, doing high damage. Salamander's default equipment is 2 Fix 2 hull repair kits. Salamander's hull strength is 9, and last of all, Salamander's mobility ability is a boost move that leaves a trail of fire behind Salamander, dealing damage to any enemies in pursuit. Next up, and my personal favorite, the Intruder suit. Intruder is a stealth-based character that has low health but very high single target damage. Intruder thrives on silently taking out single targets without starting big fights. Intruder's default weapons loadout is as follows. A Hush Puppy gun with 50 rounds, which is a single-shot silenced gun that does very high damage and stuns targets that it doesn't immediately kill. A Reflector shield, which is a 180-degree shield that not only blocks damage but also reflects it back at enemies. A Ripper Saw, which is a melee combat chainsaw that does moderate damage and stuns enemies as long as it stays in contact with them. And Remote Detonation Grenades, which are just standard grenades that can be triggered remotely for high damage. Intruder's default equipment is 2 Fix 2 hull repair kits and a cloak that allows for Intruder to go invisible on command with a moderate recharge time. Intruder's hull strength is 6. And lastly, Intruder's mobility ability is the Translocator, a teleporting beacon that can be dropped or thrown, allowing Intruder to teleport to it whenever triggered again. Great for deep diving and then getting out when in trouble. Next is the PDX-40 suit. PDX-40 is a sniper class that thrives on long-range combat, engaging enemies from afar with high-damage weapons. PDX-40's default weapons loadout is as follows. A Psycho Rifle with 400 rounds, which is a single-shot gun with high damage and is great for picking off enemies from afar. A Javelin, which is a projectile weapon that passes through enemies and sticks into the surface behind them, allowing for the 2 rounds to be retrieved. A Quick Shield that blocks damage in 180 degrees in front of the suit. And Homing Rockets with 20 rounds that seek out the closest enemies and does a high amount of damage. PDX-40's default equipment is 3 Fix 5 hull repair kits. PDX-40's hull strength is 9. Lastly, PDX-40's mobility ability is a time slowdown, which slows nearby enemies and projectiles, allowing PDX-40 to get out of sticky situations. And last of all the suits, we have the Weevil suit. Weevil is a high mobility character that thrives on jumping around in combat and getting close to enemies to deal maximum damage. Weevil's default weapon loadout is as follows. A Pulse Energy Gun, which is a low-powered energy weapon that has an infinite amount of ammo, but it has to be timed well to be effective. A Railgun with 20 rounds that does insane amount of damage and is great for sniping. A Taser, which is a melee weapon that stuns enemies when Weevil comes in contact with them. And Fragment Grenades, with 20 rounds that explode and release shrapnel, damaging any enemies they hit. Weevil's default equipment is 3 Fix 2 hull repair kits. Weevil's hull strength is 6, and last of all, Weevil's mobility ability is a phase jump that teleports Weevil forward a short distance. Let's talk about my thoughts on this game. In short, if this game could be described by a colloquialism, it would be, it missed the ship. And truthfully, I couldn't tell you why. There are a few well-known bastions of the roguelike genre over the last decade. Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, and Death's Gambit are just a few. Whether it be a symptom of poor marketing or the wrong place at the wrong time, I cannot for the life of me figure out why Kryptark did not become one of these said bastions. From the first moment of entering the first stage in the game, every second is fun. Each mission feels like a brand new challenge with difficult enemies and the need for a well thought out strategy. The addition of 7 playable suits and so many different weapons means that there's no right way to play the game. Instead of having to mold yourself as a player, the game molds itself to what playstyle you want to play, without being too easy. The combat has an excellent pace and difficulty, scaling with the levels at a perfect rate. Every time a stage is beat, it feels as if it was a great accomplishment, and somehow, even if the player dies before completing all the stages, the run never feels like it was a waste of time. For me, honestly, Kryptark is the best roguelike that no one has ever heard of. And actually, it might just be one of the best games no one has ever heard of. Truly, it's that good.